Hello everyone, welcome to the first class of interview current affairs. Today we have the topic globalization and the new world order. So the idea of this class is to give you a broad picture, broad overview on how different events that is happening in today's world system is being connected to different phases or different changes that is happening in globalization. Let's get started. Let's go through these events first. Yeah. India will not be an ally of US, it will be another great power. This was a statement recently made by US White House official. So what has come to your mind hearing this? US, a country who is propounding a US hegemonic world order, that is ceding this much of a space to India, a developing country. Why? Second, see the recent trend of mini-laterals. So many mini-laterals like Quad, Western Quad, IPEF, Indo-Pacific Economic Forum, AUKUS, all these are formed in last 2-3 years. Why there is an interest that is shifting from global system like WTO or IMF, from a global system towards mini-laterals? Why there is this shift? Third, FTAs. If you look like few years back, like 2-3 years back, what India's overview was? India was reluctant to be open to FTAs. India's view was India is not gaining that much from the FTAs as the other countries are gaining. Even in 2019, India has withdrawn from RCEP. But if you look the recent trend, India is very much open to FTAs. You have heard that recently India signed FTA with UAE. India signed the ECTA agreement with something like a pre-FTA agreement with Australia. Talks of FTA are already in progress with Israel, with UK, with EU, many countries. Why there is a shift towards India's FTA policy? Secondly, lastly, like Belt and Road Initiative. How this is impacting India's position? Should India join BRI instead of opposing it? What are India's concerns regarding a BRI? And after this, what happened in Sri Lanka, the debt trap diplomacy of China has been subjected to a lot of criticism. So many countries started looking BRI with a skeptical perspective. ASEAN countries, various ASEAN countries, for example. Ukraine crisis and aftermath of the US sanctions on Russia. Despite sanctions, India is continuing to buy Russian oil. Recently, the Ukraine foreign minister made a statement. India is able to buy cheap Russian oil because we are dying. Such a powerful statement. How you comprehend this statement? How you understand this statement? All this we are going to give you an overview on all these happenings. Why this is happening? How these are all, even though it looks totally independent events, how these are all interconnected. Let's go ahead. Yeah, if you look at the evolution of globalization, globalization is not a new phenomenon. It has been throughout the history of mankind. From Indus Valley civilization, you can connect with globalization, spread of ideas, trading of goods. All this was happening even 3,500 years back. But in modern phase globalization, you can look at different phases. And what is more important, what I want to convey is not the different phases. This you already know. What is the key idea that driven these phases? The first phase, mercantilism. When was it happened? From around 16th to say 18th century. So when this happened, the idea was a nation can get wealthy or nation can acquire wealth only by maximizing the exports and minimizing the imports. It was with this idea governments were forming companies. Different companies, British East India Company, Dutch East India Company, all these companies were formed with this idea keeping in mind. This was the underlying idea. Secondly, it led to colonization. When colonization, it became direct plunder, direct drain of wealth. You have been reading today a Colombian paper, Colombian Press University Press paper has published that 45 trillion US dollar. That was the amount drained from India during the colonial past. 45 trillion US dollars. What is India's today's GDP? Just less than 3 trillion. So you can see the gravity of the drain that happened during the colonization period. So the idea from using trade to increase the wealth of a nation, the idea during colonization became direct drain of wealth. And this was done by direct political subjugation. Now, what is the inflection point in this system? That was World Wars. First and Second World War. Why it happened? Mainly because the fight for colonies. And once the Second World War finished, or after the Second World War, then rise the era of free trade, era of Bretton Woods institution, Bretton Woods principles. And what was guiding idea during this phase? The idea was efficiency. How you explain this? Efficiency. Suppose you have to produce something, you have to, suppose a mobile phone, you have to produce this. If this mobile phone is being produced in US, it may cost 1.2 lakh rupees. The same mobile phone, if it is being produced in China, it may be done for say 6,000 rupees. So where should you invest, or where should you do the production? In China only. This was the basic idea. And efficiency, wherever the system is most efficient, wherever you can produce the product for least amount of cost, there you should do the investment. There you should build up the companies. And how this was done? This was done through MNCs. This phase is also called era of neo-colonialization. That not like earlier times, countries are not directly under political control of the advanced countries, but somehow the control is maintained by different MNCs. Third scramble of Africa, something which is related to this neo-colonization. Now this was working okay. Now what driven the change in Bretton Woods organization? Let's see. So when Bretton Woods system was happening, the idea was efficiency gain and easing the trade barriers. We have system like GATT, we had system like WTO. The idea was trade should be eased. Dollar became a global currency. All global trade was happening in dollar. So these were all our features of Bretton Woods institution. Now how this is facing a threats, or what the threats these Bretton Woods systems are facing? One first major threat is China. How China became a threat to Bretton Woods system? What China acquired in last 30 years? China acquired a growth rate of above 9% per year growth consistently for last 30 years. You can see India is even struggling to have a consistent growth rate of above 7%. During this time, there was global financial meltdown, 2008-9. All this was happening, China still able to maintain an average growth of 9%. And it became manufacturing powerhouse. Once China became manufacturing powerhouse, it is not going to stop with simply the export of goods and services. The next phase of exports came from infrastructure. And it is in this context you should see Belt and Road Initiative. Now, what is India's arguments against joining Belt and Road Initiative? One major argument is this is not simply an economic project. Belt and Road Initiative does have strategic interest behind it. So, when strategic interest is behind it, what does it imply? The supporting argument, you can see how China is using its trade advantage to force other countries and to gain advantage over other countries to get its strategic goals achieved. For example, the process we call it as weaponization of trade. China is using its trade position to weaponize, to achieve its different strategic goals. Some examples you can see in 2010, Japan, what China did. Japan is a country with huge electronics manufacturing industry. Now when China has political issues over Senkaku Islands, China banned the export of rare earth elements. And China is having extreme dominance over rare earth elements, and this nearly crumbled the industry, electronics industry in Japan. Same thing it done with Australia. Australia, when COVID broke out, Australia was in the forefront. Forefront was for demanding and fair or independent investigation to the origin of COVID virus. And how China addressed this? China banned beef exports from Australia to China. Even though some it didn't ban outrightly, it put some phytosanitary measures so that the beef from Australia is not coming to China. So what it's basically doing is, it's having a strong economic position due to its being an manufacturing powerhouse. It is using this position to gain strategic goals. India is having huge dependence of APIs. All Indian generic industry is depending on APIs from China. For different exports which India is doing, India is still dependent on imports from China. So tomorrow if China would start weaponizing its trade position against India, what India can do? So in this context, China is weaponizing. China developed as a product of Bretton Woods system. Now it is using its position to weaponize, achieve its strategic goals against other countries. So this is something a great flow from in whatever the developments the Bretton Woods system has propounded. The same thing you can see in case of Russia. The Ukraine crisis is happening. What US has done? US has done sanctions. Despite the sanctions, European countries are continuing to buy Russian gas, Nord pipeline. Why they are continuing to buy Russian gas? Because the energy for the winter, during the energy dependence of main countries of Europe, is strongly dependent on Russia. They cannot find an alternative in few time, or it is highly costly to find another alternative in West Asia or another part of the world. So there is huge dependence on Europe on Russia. Now despite the sanctions, despite what Russia does, these countries are to an extent continuing to buy Russian oil, Russian gas. And it is in this context India is saying, what? If Europe is buying Russian gas, why shouldn't we buy Russian oil? Russian oil is critical to the development of India. Why should India shy away? What Russia is doing, if you contextualize, as China is doing weaponization of trade, Russia is doing weaponization of energy. This is another similar to what China is doing in another sector. What are other issues related to Bretton Woods or free trade era? Another major change that happened is digitization. With advent of digitization, globalization of goods, globalization of services, globalization of capital, globalization of people, all these are being shifted to social globalization. Anything social event that is happening in USA is readily having its implications in India. For example, this Black Lives Movement, Black Lives Matter movement in US. It's something very much related to US, but still it had implications on India. Racist systems, racist practices that is prevalent in India had been questioned. So everything today is social happening is getting globalized. In this context, another thing you have to note down is 5 major companies. Who are these? Google, Amazon, Meta, Apple and Microsoft. These 5 companies are ruling the digital world. And this is leading to huge level of inequality, not only in wealth, but who controls the digital space, who controls whose free speech rights. Everything is being controlled one way or the other by 5 giants, big tech giants. It is in this context you should understand the risk of events like Cambridge Analytica. What is the risk of Cambridge Analytica? These companies XYZ data available with Meta or Facebook that is being used to profile the US voters, and different strategies were employed to influence them. So this has the capacity, one way or the other, legal or illegal, to even influence the political system, including elections in US. So this is another flaw or another threat to whatever the ideas that Bretton Woods has put forward or which it has stand for. Now what is the solution to it? What is solution if China is weaponizing its trade position? What is solution if Russia is weaponizing its trade position? So one attempt is friendshoring. What is friendshoring? What does it mean? Friendshoring means instead of giving efficiency the major criteria, you are shifting into something else. You are shifting into resilience. Instead of efficiency, efficiency is not only enough to have a security or stability of the supply chain. You should look at the resilience. And how this resilience is coming into picture? Countries should limit trade with friendly countries. Friendly countries. Recently, the US Secretary Yellen visited India, and she came up with a statement like India should be in the friendshoring list of US. So what countries are trying to do today is, instead of being open globalization, instead of globalization depending only on efficiency, countries are moving towards friendshoring. Countries are limiting the trade to the friendly countries or to some way or the other countries sharing the same set of values, ally countries, these set of countries. Getting it is in this context you should see the rise of Quad, the Western Quad. You only speak on economic gains of Western Quad. It is an economic forum, it is an economic XYZ. Yes, it is of course economic. Everything activities related to Western Quad is economic. But there are strategic orientation underlying. It is due to the friendshoring, it is due to issues of open globalization, the friendshoring, and that is the background reason why these mini-laterals are coming into picture. Clear? Mini-laterals, friendshoring, nearshoring, regionalization, regional grouping, something like not RCEP, something like India ASEAN, something like countries want to limit trade to those countries in the neighborhood whom they can rely upon. So all these new developments you can see are one way or other connected to failure or limitations of Bretton Woods system and the urge of the world to move towards a new system. Okay, let's move ahead. So this is the overall picture. The world is moving towards from Bretton Woods to a new system, and friendshoring is propounded as a new idea or a new framework. It is in this framework you should see development of Quad, AUKUS, IPEF, everything. Clear? Now you try to answer this question. What is India's role in this evolving world order? How should India respond to these developments? Or India is responding by being open to more FTAs, to increasing its global trade presence. That's how India currently is responding. Or should it do more of it? Or what should be the future strategy? It's Second question, do you think friendshoring will reverse the gains of globalization? Of course, globalization has certain issues. The system itself is under threat in recent times. But that doesn't mean globalization is a failed idea in present time. Globalization does comes with huge advantage, and those countries who got these advantages, countries like India and China. Should we completely go away with globalization? So try to answer these questions from this perspective. So that's all for today. And one more thing to add, like if you want a more set of questions, more number of questions, the list of questions has been uploaded in the Telegram group of Kalam IAS. You can download and go through it. So thank you for watching. All the best.